Brody froze as he watched Elias drop to one knee in front of his female colleague at the company gala, the ring sparkling under the lights. What came next would force Brody to question everything about the man he loved in secret for 3 years. The ballroom at the upscale Manhattan hotel buzzed with holiday cheer. Strings of white lights draped across the ceiling like stars against the night skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. Colleagues clapped and whistled as Sarah, Elias's co-worker in the finance department, covered her mouth in surprise, her blonde hair catching the glow from the chandeliers. Elias looked up at her with that familiar warm smile, the one Brody had seen directed at him in stolen moments behind closed doors. But this time it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. 3 years of whispered promises, late-night texts, and hidden weekends in upstate cabins, all reduced to this public performance. Brody stood near the bar, his champagne flute suddenly heavy in his hand, the bubbles rising like the panic in his throat. He had known this day might come. Elias had warned him months ago about the pressure from his conservative family back in Texas. "They keep asking when I'm going to settle down with a nice girl," Elias had said one rainy evening in Brody's Brooklyn apartment, his dark hair damp from the shower as they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like both of them. "I can't keep dodging forever, Brody. It's just for show." Brody had nodded then, swallowing the hurt because he loved Elias enough to wait. But watching it unfold now, with 200 people cheering, made the wait feel like a lifetime of silence he could no longer endure. The proposal ended with a polite kiss on Sarah's cheek, nothing passionate, just enough to sell the lie. Elias rose, accepting handshakes and back slaps from their boss and the rest of the marketing team. Brody turned away, slipping out onto the terrace where the December wind bit through his suit jacket. Central Park stretched below, its paths lit by lampposts, a world away from the chaos inside. He pulled out his phone, thumbs hovering over Elias's contact. What could he even say? "Congrats on your fake engagement?" The words tasted bitter. Elias found him 10 minutes later, the terrace door clicking shut behind him. "Brody, wait, it's not what it looks like." His voice was low, urgent, the same tone he used when they'd first confessed their feelings during a college reunion 2 years after NYU graduation. They had reconnected at a mutual friend's wedding, Elias freshly out of a dead-end job in Dallas, Brody climbing the ladder at the same ad agency. One late-night walk through Washington Square Park had turned into hours of talking, then a hesitant first kiss under the arch that changed everything. Brody spun around, his athletic frame tense under the tailored jacket. "Not what it looks like. You just proposed to her in front of the entire office, Elias." I stood there like an idiot watching the man I love pretend to build a future with someone else. His brown eyes burned with unshed tears, the city lights reflecting in them like distant stars he could never reach. Elias stepped closer, his hand hovering as if afraid to touch. The wind ruffled his dark hair, making him look younger, more vulnerable than the confident executive he played at work. "I had to," Elias whispered, glancing back at the glass doors where silhouettes moved inside. "My parents are flying in next week. They've been hounding me about grandkids, about carrying on the family name. You know how they are. One wrong word and they cut me off completely, just like they did to my cousin when he came out. This buys me time." Brody laughed bitterly, the sound swallowed by the traffic far below. Time. That was all their relationship had ever been. Stolen pockets of it. Weekends when Elias could slip away without raising suspicion. Nights when Brody waited alone wondering if love was supposed to feel this heavy. Flashbacks hit him hard as he stared at the man he'd given his heart to. Their first real date disguised as a guy's trip to the Hamptons, where they walked the beach at sunrise holding hands for the first time without fear. The way Elias had held him after Brody's promotion, whispering, "I'm so proud of you," like it was the most natural thing in the world. But every "I love you" had come with the condition of secrecy, and Brody was exhausted from carrying it alone. "I'm tired, Elias," he said finally, voice cracking. "Tired of being the secret you're ashamed of. Tired of watching you build a life I'm not allowed to be part of." Elias reached out, fingers brushing Brody's arm, sending the familiar spark through both of them. "You're not a secret to me. You're everything." Just give me until after the holidays. I'll figure this out. But the promise rang hollow against the backdrop of Sarah's laughter drifting from inside. Brody pulled away, the cold metal railing pressing into his back. Around them, the city pulsed with life, couples strolling hand in hand below, free to love openly. While his own heart fractured under the weight of what Elias couldn't yet give, he turned and walked back inside, leaving Elias standing alone on the terrace, the proposal ring still burning in his pocket like a lie neither of them could escape. The night was far from over, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The days after the gala blurred into a haze of forced smiles at the office and sleepless nights in Brody's empty apartment. Elias texted apologies every hour, but Brody couldn't bring himself to reply right away. The image of that proposal replayed constantly. The way Sarah had hugged Elias, the cheers from coworkers who had no idea the real story involved late-night drives up the Hudson where they'd pull over just to kiss under the stars. Brody threw himself into work, pitching campaigns for clients who wanted authentic American stories, all while his own felt like the biggest fraud. On Wednesday, Elias cornered him in the break room, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the tension between them. "We need to talk. Please." His dark eyes pleaded, the same eyes that had looked at Brody with such raw honesty during their first weekend away in Vermont. Snow falling outside their cabin as they talked about dreams neither had shared with anyone else. Brody set down his mug, arms crossed over his athletic chest. "Talk about what? How you're engaged now. How I get to watch you pick out wedding colors while I pretend we're just friends." Elias glanced at the door, lowering his voice. "It's fake, Brody. Sarah knows the truth. She's helping me out because her family's the same way. Conservative, religious, the whole package. But my parents they called last night. Dad went on about how proud he is that I'm finally settling down like a real man. If I back out now, they'll dig deeper. They might even show up here." The fear in his voice was real, rooted in stories Elias had shared about growing up in a small Texas town where being different meant isolation or worse. Brody remembered the night Elias had cried in his arms after a phone call home, the weight of that heritage pressing down like the Texas heat they'd escaped. Yet understanding didn't erase the exhaustion. Brody had his own family in upstate New York, supportive in theory but unaware of the depth of his feelings for Elias. He'd come out to them years ago as bisexual, but the reality of loving one man so completely had stayed private, a choice he made to protect Elias. Now it felt like a cage of his own making. "I can't keep doing this," Brody said, his voice steady despite the ache. "Every time you pull back, it chips away at me. I love you, Elias. God, I do. But love shouldn't feel like waiting in the dark forever." They left work separately that evening, but Elias showed up at Brody's door after midnight, coat dusted with light snow from the first flurries of the season. They didn't speak at first, just stood in the hallway until Brody pulled him inside. Their embrace was desperate, full of the years they'd built together. College study nights turning into something deeper, the quiet support during Elias's job loss, Brody's steady presence through it all. "I'm scared," Elias admitted against Brody's shoulder, the words muffled but heavy. "Scared of losing you, scared of losing them. What if coming out means I lose everything?" Brody held him tighter, the familiar warmth of Elias's body a reminder of why he'd fought so hard. But the proposal had cracked something irreparable. They talked until dawn, piecing through memories. The first time Elias had said, "I love you," during a picnic in Prospect Park. The arguments over small things like whose turn it was to choose the movie. Misunderstandings had always been there. Elias canceling plans at the last minute because of family calls. Brody feeling sidelined, but they'd always found their way back. This time felt different. Sarah texted Elias updates on the engagement charade, and Brody saw the messages, each one a fresh wound. By Friday, the office buzzed with wedding talk. Colleagues congratulated Elias in the halls, and Brody forced smiles through meetings, his mind elsewhere. A coworker pulled him aside during lunch. "You okay, man? You and Elias seem off lately." Brody brushed it off, but the question lingered. Off? They were unraveling. That night, alone again, Brody stared at photos on his phone. Candid shots from their secret trips, Elias laughing freely without the weight of secrets. The fatigue settled deep in his bones. He typed a message he didn't send. Maybe it's time I let go. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, steady but uncertain. Across the city, Elias lay awake too, the ring box on his nightstand a constant reminder of the choice he wasn't ready to make. The misunderstandings were piling up, and the path ahead looked darker than either had imagined. Christmas lights twinkled along Fifth Avenue as Brody walked alone, the holiday crowds a blur of red and green. Elias had spent the weekend with Sarah at a family dinner in New Jersey to keep up appearances, and the silence between them stretched like the frozen Hudson River. Brody's phone buzzed with a photo from Elias, him smiling stiffly beside Sarah, parents beaming in the background. For show only, the caption read. Brody deleted it without replying, the act feeling like severing a lifeline. He met an old friend for drinks that evening, a straight colleague who knew nothing of the secret. "You seem distracted," the friend said over pints at a cozy bar in Chelsea. Brody shrugged, steering the conversation away, but inside he replayed every moment where Elias had chosen safety over truth. The betrayal wasn't intentional, but it stung just the same. Back at his apartment, Brody scrolled through old messages, landing on one from their first anniversary. "You make the hiding worth it." Now it felt like a lie he'd told himself. Elias called on Monday, voice strained. "My parents want to meet Sarah properly. They're coming to New York next month." The conversation turned heated, Elias defending his choices while Brody's exhaustion spilled over. "You're asking me to watch you live a double life, and I'm supposed to cheer from the sidelines? I've sacrificed too much already." Words flew. Accusations of selfishness, counterclaims of fear. But beneath it all was love, raw and stubborn. Elias hung up first, leaving Brody staring at the ceiling, wondering if growth meant walking away. Work became a battlefield of polite distance. They collaborated on a campaign, their ideas clashing in meetings as unspoken tensions simmered. Colleagues noticed, whispering about bromance troubles. One evening after a long day, Elias waited by Brody's desk. "Let's get out of here. Just us." They drove to a quiet spot in the Catskills, the drive filled with tentative conversation. Elias opened up about childhood memories. Sunday church services where difference was sin, the pressure to be the perfect son. Brody listened, heart aching, but the fatigue had roots now. "I see you trying," he said softly as they stood by a frozen lake. "But I'm running out of strength to wait." Misunderstandings deepened when Brody went on a casual date with a guy from the gym. Nothing serious, just coffee to feel normal. Elias found out through a mutual friend and showed up angry. "You're moving on already?" The fight in Brody's living room echoed with pain. Elias feeling abandoned, Brody defending his right to breathe. Yet in the quiet after, they held each other, tears mixing with apologies. Sacrifice loomed. Elias offering to delay the fake wedding, Brody considering a transfer to the West Coast office. The rising tension pulled them in opposite directions, each decision carrying consequences neither could fully predict. As snow fell outside, Brody whispered, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." Elias didn't answer, but the silence spoke volumes about the crossroads they faced. Elias's parents arrived the second week of January, their Texas drawl filling the upscale restaurant Elias had chosen for dinner. Brody sat across from them as the best friend, smiling through stories of Elias's childhood while his stomach twisted. Mr. Ramirez, a stern man in a crisp shirt, clapped Elias on the back. "Proud of you, son. Sarah seems like a keeper." Mrs. Ramirez beamed, asking about wedding plans. Elias's hand brushed Brody's under the table once, a secret plea for strength, but it only highlighted the divide. The evening dragged with questions Brody answered carefully, his athletic frame rigid in the chair. Elias's eyes met his across the candlelight, full of the same conflict from their college days when they'd hidden stolen glances in the library. Afterward, in the cab back to Brooklyn, Elias broke. "I hated every second, but seeing them happy, it's complicated." Brody nodded, but the fatigue had turned to resolve. Complicated is watching the man I love erase us for their approval. The next days brought more family outings. Brunch, a Broadway show where Sarah joined as the fiancée. Brody tagged along as the supportive friend, each laugh a reminder of what he couldn't have publicly. Tensions peaked when Elias's father pulled Brody aside. "You're a good influence on my boy. Keep him straight." The word choice hit like a slap. That night, alone with Elias, the argument exploded. "I can't be your secret anymore," Brody said, voice breaking. "It's killing me." Elias paced, tears in his eyes. "You think it's easy for me? I'm trapped between two worlds." A betrayal of sorts came when Elias postponed their usual weekend getaway for more family time. Brody spent it packing boxes, half-heartedly browsing apartments in Chicago for a fresh start. Misunderstandings multiplied, Elias assuming Brody was done, Brody feeling pushed away. Yet a quiet dinner midweek brought clarity. Elias shared more about his fears, the identity crisis that kept him chained. Brody listened, offering the empathy that had always defined them. Sacrifice hung in the air. Perhaps stepping back was the kindest act. As they parted that night with a lingering hug, the city lights blurred through Brody's tears. The high point approached, decisions looming that would redefine everything. The confrontation came on a stormy Friday when Elias's parents extended their stay, insisting on a group photo at the Statue of Liberty Ferry. Brody declined the invitation, citing work, but the real reason was self-preservation. Elias called him afterward, voice raw. "I almost told them today. Almost." Brody sat on his couch, rain lashing the windows. "Almost isn't enough anymore. I've given you 3 years of almosts." They met at their favorite park bench in Central Park the next morning, the same spot where they'd shared their first real kiss years ago. Elias looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm scared of losing you, but I'm more scared of who I'll become if I keep lying." Brody reached out, touching his shoulder, the gesture familiar yet heavy with finality. "Then stop lying to everyone but yourself." The conversation stretched for hours, covering every sacrifice. Missed holidays, hidden anniversaries, the internal storm Elias battled daily. Elias broke down then, admitting the proposal was a breaking point for him too. "I thought it would protect us, but it's destroying us instead." Brody felt the shift, his own growth emerging through the pain. He'd learned he deserved more than shadows. They walked the paths together, hands brushing but not holding, the decision to pause their relationship hanging unspoken. Misunderstandings cleared in waves of honesty, consequences laid bare. Family disappointment, career whispers, personal rebirth. As the storm cleared, Elias whispered, "I need time to figure out how to step into the light." Brody nodded, heart heavy but lighter. "And I need to stop waiting in the dark." They parted with a promise to stay in touch, the sacrifice mutual yet necessary for growth. Months later, spring bloomed in New York with cherry blossoms lining the streets. Brody had taken the Chicago transfer, building a new routine filled with honest friendships and quiet reflection. Elias texted occasionally, updates on therapy sessions, small steps toward openness with a sibling. The distance healed old wounds, turning pain into understanding. One weekend, Elias visited, no secrets this time. They walked the lakefront, talking freely about the journey. The proposal shock, the family pressures, the exhaustion that forced change. Elias had started coming out slowly, first to close friends, then planning a call home. "You gave me the courage by letting go," he said, eyes clear for the first time. Brody smiled, the fatigue replaced by peace. Their love had evolved into something stronger, friendship rooted in truth. No grand reunion, just mutual respect for the paths chosen. As they watched the sun set over the water, Brody realized growth came from the hardest choices. True or false? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go when they can't step into the light.